3. Blend of rigidity and flexibility. Constitutions are also classified into rigid and flexible. A rigid constitution is one that requires a special procedure for its amendment, as for example, the American Constitution. A flexible constitution, on the other hand, is one that can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made, as for example, the British Constitution. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible but a synthesis of both. Article 368 provides for two types of amendments. A. Some provisions can be amended by a special majority of the Parliament, i.e., a two-third majority of the members of each House present and voting, and a majority, that is, more than 50% of the total membership of each House. B. Some other provisions can be amended by a special majority of the Parliament and with the ratification by half of the total states. At the same time, some provisions of the Constitution can be amended by a simple majority of the Parliament in the manner of ordinary legislative process. Notably, these amendments do not come under Article 368. 4. Federal system with unitary bias. The Constitution of India establishes a federal system of government. It contains all the usual features of a federation, viz., two government, division of powers, written constitution, supremacy of constitution, rigidity of constitution, independent judiciary and bicameralism. However, the Indian Constitution also contains a large number of unitary or non-federal features, viz., a strong center, single constitution, single citizenship, flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary, appointment of state governor by the center, all India services, emergency provisions, and so on. Moreover, the term federation has nowhere been used in the Constitution. Article 1, on the other hand, describes India as a union of states, which implies two things. 1. Indian federation is not the result of an agreement by the states, and 2. No state has the right to secede from the federation. Hence, the Indian Constitution has been variously described as federal in form but unitary in spirit, quasi-federal, by K. C. Weir, bargaining federalism, by Morris Jones, cooperative federalism, by Granville Austin, federation with a centralizing tendency, by Ivor Jennings, and so on. 5. Parliamentary form of government. The Constitution of India has opted for the British parliamentary system of government rather than American presidential system of government. The parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the legislative and executive organs, while the presidential system is based on the doctrine of separation of powers between the two organs. The parliamentary system is also known as the Westminster 10 model of government, responsible government and cabinet government. The Constitution establishes the parliamentary system not only at the center but also in the states. The features of parliamentary government in India are a presence of nominal and real executives. B. Majority party rule. C. Collective responsibility of the executive to the legislature. D. Membership of the ministers in the legislature. E. Leadership of the prime minister or the chief minister. F. Dissolution of the lower house Lok Sabha or assembly. Even though the Indian parliamentary system is largely based on the British pattern, there are some fundamental differences between the two. For example, the Indian Parliament is not a sovereign body like the British Parliament. Further, the Indian state has an elected head republic while the British state has hereditary head monarchy. In a parliamentary system, whether in India or Britain, the role of the Prime Minister has become so significant and crucial that the political scientists like to call it a prime ministerial government. 6. Synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. The doctrine of sovereignty of Parliament is associated with the British Parliament, while the principle of judicial supremacy with that of the American Supreme Court. Just as the Indian parliamentary system differs from the British system, the scope of judicial review power of the Supreme Court in India is narrower than that of what exists in U.S. This is because the American Constitution provides for due process of law, against that of procedure established by law, contained in the Indian Constitution, Article 21. Therefore, the framers of the Indian Constitution have preferred a proper synthesis between the British principle of parliamentary sovereignty and the American principle of judicial supremacy. The Supreme Court, on the one hand, can declare the parliamentary laws as unconstitutional through its power of judicial review. The Parliament, on the other hand, can amend the major portion of the Constitution through its constituent power. 7. Integrated and independent judiciary. The Indian Constitution establishes a judicial system that is integrated as well as independent. The Supreme Court stands at the top of the integrated judicial system in the country. Below it, there are high courts at the state level. Under a high court, there is a hierarchy of subordinate courts, that is, district courts and other lower courts. This single system of courts enforces both the central laws as well as the state laws, unlike in USA, where the federal laws are enforced by the federal judiciary and the state laws are enforced by the state judiciary. The Supreme Court is a federal court, the highest court of appeal, the guarantor of the fundamental rights of the citizens and the guardian of the Constitution. Hence, the Constitution has made various provisions to ensure its independence, security of tenure of the judges, fixed service conditions for the judges, all the expenses of the Supreme Court charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, prohibition on discussion on the conduct of judges in the legislatures, ban on practice after retirement, power to punish for its contempt vested in the Supreme Court, separation of the judiciary from the executive, and so on. 8. Fundamental rights. Part 3 of the Indian Constitution guarantees 611 fundamental rights to all the citizens. A. Right to equality, Articles 14 to 18. B. Right to freedom, Articles 19 to 22. C. Right against exploitation, Articles 23 to 24. D. Right to freedom of religion, Articles 25 to 28. E. Cultural and educational rights, Articles 29 to 30, and F. Right to constitutional remedies, Article 32. The fundamental rights are meant for promoting the idea of political democracy. They operate as limitations on the tyranny of the executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. They are justiciable in nature, that is, they are enforceable by the courts for their violation. The aggrieved person can directly go to the Supreme Court, which can issue the writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari and quo warranto for the restoration of his rights. However, the fundamental rights are not absolute and subject to reasonable restrictions. Further, they are not sacrosanct and can be curtailed or repealed by the Parliament through a Constitutional Amendment Act. They can also be suspended during the operation of a national emergency except the rights guaranteed by Articles 20 and 21.